Welcome to the Faithful Fathering Podcast. This is Rick Wertz, founder and president of Faithful Fathering, where we encourage and equip dads to be faithful fathers. And the vision is to engage dads in raising a godly generation and reinvigorate the church on the fathering front. This podcast series, we're living into Father's Day month. It's a month-long effort to encourage and equip you specifically through these podcasts and other information available on the website at faithfulfathering.org. But we're talking about some of the basic things dads face and how we can maybe be sensitized to them to a new level across this month and make some choices, make some changes as necessary, and find some other dads to hold us accountable on the journey. In the house with me today to help on this dialogue is Mr. Robert Valle. Thank you for joining us, Robert.
Thank you for having me on, Rick.
One thing that I find myself, and maybe that's not the case for you, but I take pride in being the chief critical officer of my home. That I feel the need to criticize because I want my child to be ready for that next chapter of life. I don't have any time for lollygagging around and what have you. I want to criticize and get him back on that right path. How are you doing on that?
Well, front? I think you're asking the wrong person, man. We can ask my wife, and she'll give you the truth. She'll give you great perspective on that.
She's the great critiquer?
Oh, she'll tell you about my critiquiness. Okay. One of the things that I love my wife, and she'll tell me, I'll be on the phone with a brother from church or anybody, giving advice. And she told me once, she goes, "You're really good at giving advice. You ever thought about taking some of your own?" I'm like, oh, yes. So if you want to know the real deal, you can ask her, and she'll tell you everything without my slant, without my skew. She'll give it to you the way it is.
Well, you can get busted that way. I think it was Senator Joe Lieberman that was at a presidential prayer breakfast back in the H.W. Bush years.
Okay.
And they were doing the prayer, and Joe just made the comment. He says, if you guys acted more like the guy you pray to, we wouldn't have all these issues that we're facing. And, so a Jewish gentleman called out the Christians and just let them know that you're right. Maybe we want to look in the mirror a little bit.
That's right. That's right.
So how has your bride done to help pull you back from this chief critical officer role?
Oh, well, she'll after the fact, she'll tell me, hey, maybe you should have done that differently, or maybe you shouldn't have yelled, or, maybe she's really good about bringing those things up that I'm not seeing, or maybe I'm in the middle of something, or there's some high pressure stuff going on with work and a very tense situation, and I just zone out and maybe I yell at one of the kids or something, and she'll gently tell me, hey, that's probably not the best way to do it.
That's the beauty of that woman he blessed us with, right?
That's right.
That they can, I in particular, I'll have unrealistic expectations. If the boy is I throw him a ground ball at 4 years old and the ball goes through his legs, he's never going to be a ball player.
That's it. We quit.
We need to do some drills and get this together. And of course, she always calibrates, says, let's have some realistic expectations.
Right. 4 years old.
Girls have the idea that, women have this radar. Women have this radar that really helps them understand what the real capabilities should be at a respective age. I remember during the pregnancy, she would let me know at 6 months, 8 months, how big the child was and what they're doing now, and what have you. And of course, in life, as they get 2, 3, 5, 7, 8 years old, it's also, hey, look around.
Right.
How many kids you see fielding and throwing the ball to first from shortstop is 4 years old, right? Yeah. So it's but then there's also the concern we have about preparing them for the next chapter of life. You're at the teenage years with your son, preparing him for some of the curveballs that he's going to face not only in school, but in a few short years when he's away from home.
Right.
Things. How do you? What have you done to set up rules or disciplinary action or what have you to help bring all this into the right perspective of criticism?
So the number one thing that we need to remember personally in my marriage, and I'm thinking it's going to be this way in a lot of other marriages, is we're two different people. My wife and I are two different people raised in two different households with two different sets of rules, two different sets of expectations, possibly two different outlooks. And we had to purposely decide that, okay, we're on the same team and we may have done things differently, whether it be the toilet paper being, over or under, or, we were talking about that at church the other day. But at the end of the day, this is how we are going to do it in our household. And we need to be on the same page. And we need to remember, because there's going to be times where we disagree, we need to remember that we're on the same team and we have to figure out what is going to be the best move for this team. A lot easier said than done. It's great in theory, and practically it's great once you do it enough. But it's hard to do.
Well, it is easier said than done, and it is very true that you come in that it isn't a popular discussion during the dating years.
Right.
Hey, how did your parents discipline you?
Right.
Or, and what are we going to do in our home when we get together? Now, it's something you figure out afterwards. In our case, my bride grew up in a very quiet home. If voices got raised, the issue got tabled until things settled down. And in my home, it was the loudest and cursiest won the argument. So, these are things that
Right.
you don't talk about as a dating couple, but in marriage, you got to address these things.
Oh, no, go ahead, Rick. Go
I
ahead.
just guess so you can, when it comes to discipline. I was a sorry discipliner. I was a very
animated.
Well, I wouldn't say animated. It was a physical discipline, because in my home it was beatings will continue till morale improves. Now I didn't beat the child, but I was corporate punishment spanking was part of the deal. But Lyndon, my bride and I had to work through that and say, okay, if we're going to discipline, let's make sure it's not out of anger. That's where
Right.
I was particularly bad, because every time I took a beating, there was a lot of anger, and I just thought that was, we grow up in what we grow up in. That's the norm until we get a wake up call like I got. So the challenge is to understand where that discipline needs to be implemented and what the appropriate discipline might be. Have you guys come to those terms?
Yeah. So I would lean towards the physical discipline. And I had to learn, not that I would want to physically discipline for everything, but I had to learn that physical discipline would be more for extreme violations, if you will, extreme situations. And that was helpful. Another thing is, we were talking about being different, right? How we were raised differently. I remember one time early in our marriage, I was raised in a home where there was a lot of fighting, there was a lot of arguing, and in the back of my mind, all I thought about was divorce, divorce, divorce. They're going to get divorced. Eventually, they got divorced when I was in my 20s, but my wife's parents were married until they died. And for me, an argument was one close step away to divorce. So I'll never forget this, and my wife remembers it vividly. We shared in our marriage class at church from time to time, is we would get into an argument, and she would just need time alone to vent and to process, so she wouldn't say anything that she would regret. Well, in my mind, she's going to vent. I need to make sure we fix it now. Well, one time we got into it very early in our marriage, and she goes into the bedroom and locks the door because she needed time to herself. Well, what does Robert do? He grabs a coat hanger and picks the door open, and that was the wrong move. But one thing that we say a lot is we have to be a student of our bride, and vice versa, right? We have to be a student of our spouse. So I learned, and it was not after that one time, after several times, wait a minute, we're different. We process things differently. And she needs time to cool off. I know I want to fix things right away, but nothing's going to happen if we don't fix things right away. So we had to kind of, it goes back to being a team. In a team, you figure out your strengths, your weaknesses, who's good at what, And that's the positions that you put them in. Well, I have strengths, my wife has strengths, and we just have to make sure that we're playing the right position for whatever the situation may be.
Well said. And I do want to make very clear, dads, we are not counselors or psychologists or psychiatrists. So I'm not condoning any type of discipline that's right for you, or even that we did it right as dads. But I do want you to sit down with your bride and discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of the way you were raised, and establish rules in your home. Seek counseling in the church or professional counseling if you have disagreements on that. But it is important to get very clear rules, age-appropriate rules, and age-appropriate disciplinary action mapped out and agreed upon, not only as husband and wife, but with all the kids. And then when you implement discipline, it is just the result of a rule being broken. There's no emotion involved in the discipline itself. So, and I myself, Robert, I've crossed that line into anger with my son in a disciplinary action, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And I had to get on my knee and ask, son, will you forgive me? I've lost self-discipline. I can certainly not continue on with a disciplinary action toward you. And of course, he's more than happy to forgive me because it got him out of the day. He knew the discipline was stopping, so that was a positive. But it was something I had to it was very humble in approaching this, that I had lost self-discipline.
Well, what a great picture of owning up to our actions, even when we got it wrong. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've had to apologize to my son for certain things. The other day, I apologized to my girls for yelling at them. They're little girls. They're full of energy. Dad's tired. Mm-hmm. Dad wants to chill for a little bit and zone out. Well, it's not their fault.
Suck it up, Buttercup.
Suck it up. And my wife,
friend says.
my wife was the one to point it out to me.
Sure.
You should probably apologize to the girls. And she was right.
Yeah. I
needed to. But, that just, a friend of mine gave me the advice years ago that to tell my children, especially my oldest, my first son, this is my first time being a dad. I'm doing everything I know to be right, but that doesn't mean it's all right. That I'm going to make mistakes. And just like you're being a son for the first time, I'm being a dad for the first time. And sometimes I'm going to call it wrong, and I'll apologize when I do. And I've done it. And it's just owning up to our actions and teaching them there's consequences for our actions, but we can also do whatever we can to realize and admit that we were wrong and made a mistake.
And dads, if you embrace some of these tips and the candid discussion we're having here of our own shortfalls, understand that this is all about getting you in a position of being promoted to Chief Encouragement Officer in your home. Now, I know that you're right there. You're the CEO of your home. Can you talk a little bit? Sometimes it's kind of like failure and success, isn't it? You always have to pick yourself up out of failure. You can get going. How do you handle success well, to which you can really build on that success? I've always found that tougher as a young man and as an older guy today, seasoned guy today. But so the thought of encouraging well, genuine encouragement. What does that look like for you?
So, and I'm glad you bring this up, Rick, because a lot of times I will focus on what went wrong in my household to not try to repeat those things. And it can come across as somewhat critical of my upbringing. And Mom, Dad, I love y'all. Thank y'all very much for everything you've done. You did the best you could with what you knew. But I also want to shine light on some of the good things, right? Because there's always good and bad in most upbringings, right? Mm-hmm. And we want to maybe reduce the stuff that we don't agree with, but my mom was a great encourager. I wanted to be a DJ at a very young age. She was and still is till this day my biggest cheerleader. She's my biggest supporter.
What a blessing. Mm-hmm.
And I learned encouragement from my mom, and I don't say it enough.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mom, again, publicly, I'm telling you, thank you for the encouragement. My dream was to be a mix show radio DJ, on the radio, obviously on the radio, but she encouraged me, and it happened.
And now, what's the difference between encouragement and just blowing smoke? I mean, now we don't want the, everybody gets a trophy thing.
No.
I've been against that since day one. Everybody doesn't
Absolutely.
get a trophy, doesn't get a ribbon, but there is a difference between, what genuine encouragement. If it's a ball game and he goes 0 for 3, we're still going to go out for ice cream,
Right.
but it's not a performance-based relationship. But at the same time, if the ball was fielded and just bobbled on the throw, let's celebrate the ball was fielded well,
Right,
that type of thing.
right.
So whatever the analogy might be, have you struggled with that, or is that clear when how you encourage? Have you caught that well from your mother?
I want to say I have. I like to. My goal is to be very honest. Doesn't mean I get it right. Okay, I don't want to come across like, oh, he thinks he's the most. No, because I make mistakes. But my goal is transparency, honesty, and I don't like to blow smoke.
Mm-hmm.
Much less with my family.
Mm.
So I would like to think that I'm very genuine with my encouragement. And some things, hey son, you know what? This wasn't as good and we can work on this. That other stuff was great. Keep doing that. Keep doing what you're doing there. And let's work on this. So there's that word again, right? That balance where it's not necessarily critical, it's helpful. And I'm saying this my son loves basketball. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up playing a little bit of baseball in the neighborhood, but my thing was music. That's all I cared about growing up. I didn't care about sports. My son, on the other hand, loves sports, and he's in basketball training. And I'm learning the sport, and he teaches me a lot about the sport.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go to games if we travel somewhere. He likes to visit the stadiums, and I love doing that with him. That's something I didn't get to do as a child, but tonight we're going to watch the playoff game. I mean, the finals game.
Okay.
So I'm learning to encourage him in what he likes to do, not necessarily what I like to do, but also using it as an opportunity to correct. So I like to say that the blow and smoke thing, thankfully for me, is not really an issue.
Right. That's great, and it's really ironic because there's a lot of times it's the things you're unfamiliar with that you're more encouraging of. When you know more about, like if I knew the game well, if my son had come up playing tennis, I'd have been even more critical than I was with baseball. But he fell in love with baseball. I stopped playing baseball when I was about 10. I played tennis.
Right.
But but everybody can't fall in love with the right sport. But that's.
Oh, you mean pickleball? We were joking earlier.
Dads, I want to encourage you to use this. These podcasts, and Father's Day month is all about giving you a time to, or encouraging you to make the time to reflect. Look in the mirror and see, have you been more the chief critical officer in your home than the chief encouragement officer in your home? Just plan a date night with your bride and talk through it very candidly, and see how you may take that promotion to Chief Encouragement Officer and be the dad that your kids need to see every day. Keep up the God work, and happy Father's Day month to you. God bless. Godspeed.